And I'm sharing my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay. So we have these tasks in scope, and we want to flesh out a plan, implementation plan with lines of code, all that stuff related to these tasks. So I have our like agenda thing here. I'm gonna kind of just copy this into the agenda. And then we'll throw some notes in there. And then after we draft some notes, I might put it just in the description here itself. Or I might add a new comment to it. So
you can throw a link to the video in there too.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good idea. So WebID is capable. So this is definitely the biggest, this is the critical path chunk. And a lot of this is on my plate currently. And I think
we've made some progress on this previously. Like we have the something FS that lets us get diffs or provides a mechanism for us to do it.
Yeah, so some things that are done. So let me add some historical context here, and that's good mentioning that. I'm going to add links to historical context, which would be really good. So going into the code, this is part of the source control stuff, commit flow. All of this is VS Code extension is the only thing that has access to managing stuff. So I'm going to go to our extension, the main file where we set things up. And boom, here we go.
And this is sort of like the entry point package into, and it uses the other packages as dependencies.
Yep. So this is, yeah. So, and I could also jump into the architecture document, but this is the package that compiles the extension runtime. So when we bootstrap everything, we use this built-in extension to build the file system and all sorts of other stuff. The file search provider and other things like that. So we had a whole implementation for source control related to the spike. This worked. It was not production ready because it was kind of just put together of like, can we get all these pieces interacting with each other? But it was implementing a Git-based approach. So we can go back. I'm just going to link to this line of code. Thankfully, this is in here. Man, what? Whoever's like the engineer that, you know, for this, that wrote this comment. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna give myself that much credit. Sometimes I am pleased with past Paul looking out for future Paul.
And the reason we switched away from the Git implementation, because I worked with you on this, was because like it basically relies on a Git clone, which is unacceptably slow for large repos. And there was even looking at other implementations of VS Code, including VS Code.dev, there was no way around that performance blocker of like, how do you initially clone the code? And you can't do, at least with that version, you know, partial clones. The latest release of Git has some interesting things to deal with large repos, but that's obviously not implemented in this like JavaScript fork of Git yet. That just came out like a week ago.
Yeah.
Like a whole different executable.
Yeah.
Large repos that partial clones and stuff. So maybe in the future, but for now we switched to.
Yeah, so small clarification to what you said is the spike didn't depend on Git. It implemented a Git-based algorithm, which had some issues with it. But it was very abstract, dealing with like Git objects and stuff. And it did have issues because it was dealing with Git objects. We wanted to get the original object references because these were rated to hashes of the files. So we could have gone down that path, but we identified there's some complexities here. And at that moment, we evaluated, could we use an in-browser based Git? Well, if we did that, that required actually using Git clone and stuff, which was going to be so unperformant and stuff. And then you brought up, do we really need Git? And when we dove into the file system we built, this overlay file system, we can actually get what has changed, what has been touched in real time, and compile a commit based off of that. So that's the new approach, which I think
is the minimal requirement. All we need is the diffs. And
right.
This is
Right.
much simpler way to do it than re-implementing the Git, domain.
Yeah. So let me capture some of that history. The history has like the original Spike implementation used. I hate it when machines think they're helping, but they're not. Anyways, original
Copilot, it actually helps you a lot.
I know. But for me, it's like the push git hook when I haven't run bundle and it blows up on me. That's a you're not helping. Anyways, original Spike used a Git inspired algorithm based on Git objects. There were some edge case issues with this, which brought up the need to get the original Git object IDs when pulling the repo. Yeah, this complexity caused us to reevaluate and consider
like an isomorphic Git.
Using isomorphic Git. This approach would have required Git clone, which was completely out of the question for performance reasons. Enter chat. Do we even need Git? I thought we did, but we really don't. So the new approach is, and so there's some code related to this. Let's see if we can find that. Let me actually find that in the project itself.
Yeah, we made a fair amount of we have the overlay FS implemented, just not using it to do any source control interaction.
Oh, we actually have tests for the source, we have some of that tested out too. So it is kind of just,
or the building blocks of it at least. Yeah,
piecing it together. Gosh, I actually have an issue for this, so I need to probably just look for the issue. For
there we go.
This is it. Yes. This is a good new approach has a good summary here. So this is a good implementation plan for this. Yeah, so this is kind of the algorithm for how we can get our Git status, because that's the main thing we need from the source control thing. How can we implement status from the overlay FS object that we get? Overlay FS keeps track of files that have been touched in a way that we can read here. And there's some unit tests that are also kind of confirming this. So I think so. I think there's also, this MR will probably give more context as well from the overlay FS stuff. But this is tracking changes. So this is history. New approach is a separate thing.
Could we, given the time constraints, you have 10 more minutes, right?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
Could we start from the other direction and talk about okay, from the hooking in the API to create merge requests and make commits, calling the GitLab API for that, where would that go?
Yeah.
And those things have to meet in the middle. What we just talked about here and that, and make all of the requirements for the API be fulfilled.
Yep. So what about commit flow? So there's two chunks here. There's tracking changes, then actually committing. The commit flow is definitely the easiest thing, because this is VS Code extension API. Yeah. So you get to
Can we steal some of this from the GitLab VS Code extension? Does it do some of these same things with the same APIs, or is it going to be different?
you bring up a really great point. We would yeah. So interfacing with VS Code is and is basically, so this means like creating command and commit button, showing files. This is basically following the source control VS Code extension guide here. There's some other great examples here, like I like to use I really like to use just their own repo as an example. And I can look at
this part is open source. This isn't like the file system implementation that's closed.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, so like they have a whole Git extension, which is pretty good at seeing how we can implement with this thing. So like if I'm using VS Code and I see this kind of stuff, I could do a search for almost some of these texts and see where it shows up in the VS Code project, which give me a good indication for like, okay, how do we create this button and things like that.
Can you put a link to this source in the
yeah, so like I would I'm trying to find, this is a pretty, let's just like, yeah, this is their I'm gonna get to here. Yeah. Yeah, let me see where their action button command gets used. Yeah, this would be helpful. Action button command. Yes. Yes, yeah.
So we were down there by Git. Why did we start looking at the button?
Well, I'm just like for these kind of tasks, we can use their own code to know how to interface with this stuff. So using VS Code's own code can be helpful on learning ways to interface with this API, using our GitLab workflow VS Code extension also has some source control interfacing. This was helpful too. If I do repo, I forget what it was called, GitLab VS Code extension, I think. And if I do source control, jeez, please, I really can't find that. Yeah, this is it. Source control, SCM. I thought they had let me look for it. Because I happen to know something. So like they do they interact with it based on Hamas knows this. uh, can't find it. Anyways, there's some interactions with that, but we can learn from as well. So
this should get back from parental leave about the time we're supposed to finish this, right?
yeah. um, so yeah, there's a lot of examples. This is just a matter of figuring, and the previous code does this too to some extent. Like we had the commit buttons and stuff, so it's just interfacing with the extension API. That's what the
Did we
commit.
delete that? We deleted that when we deleted the Git implementation, or was that was in a separate repo, right? Can we put a link to that?
Well, it's all part of this thing that was commented out. So it's like look at this commit to view the old.
Okay, it was in this repo because there's like a Spike repo, but
Yeah,
that part made it into here.
Yeah, so it's in here. So you can also look at. Oh, yeah, that'd be a good idea to look at. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's a great idea. Looking at the old Spike code is a good place to start. Cool. That's great. This is somewhat straightforward. So plan. This is straightforward. Forward. Let me change is to could be, and is likely just
Exercise for the reader.
You know, the proof for this is simple. I've run out of room. Yeah. So this is, so we're previously in extension land. This is in workbench configuration land, like huge product JSON, all the configuration stuff.
What is workbench?
So that's what VS Code calls it when we kick all this stuff off. They're saying you're creating the VS Code workbench, and it's everything, and it's huge configuration JSON thing that we can mess with. In our project, this package is called VS Code Bootstrap, and it would be in our. I'm not in mail, which is why I'm not seeing it. Oh, jeez. Okay. VS Code Bootstrap. Start. So it's here where we would in our base config. Yes. Yeah. Let me permalink this thing. Yes. This should be straightforward, likely just updating our product configuration, and we bootstrap VS Code here. Yep. And I believe that's even like, yeah, like this is also likely product configuration related. See, or extensions will be disabled. We'll need to look into loading custom themes. Does this have to wait for? Oh, does this
There was a thread on this about this being a stretch goal, possibly.
Yeah. Does this have to come from extension land? Or can we do this inside VS Code extension? Or can we do this inside VS Code Bootstrap? Yeah. We'll have time to provide the inclusion of the top navigation, and that's a UX discussion.
Right.
I'm gonna say the plan is NA, currently refining requirements. Configuring a connection can be done. Yes, so the plan is basically this issue, which is being developed right now. That's a good summary. This is like, how do we want to alert users about the limitation? Does VS Code give us the ability to, so this is another really good thing to note about VS Code's API. So here's like, when you're in extension land, you have access to this entire API. There's also a proposed API, which you won't see here, but you can see the proposed API. You can see if I, in our project, if I go to proposed, if I go to where these proposed APIs, where this stuff lives, so let me do a search in their repo for proposed. Yeah, so you can see all the different proposed APIs that we can potentially bring in. So these
So
are.
do we get the searching of open files for free already?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But with the overlay FS, like we have something that knows about every file that exists,
But not the contents of it.
not the contents.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Here's an interesting thing. Like they have find text and files. And like, so they have actually a proposed API for handling this in the more fancy way. But like the main thing that's in scope is how do we want to alert users about the limitation? And I don't know what we can change here. We can add, like, we can definitely hook into that, like, give us the ability to add something.
Well, maybe we're making this too complicated. We're already gonna like pop something up when they switch to this. It could just be additional text there.
Yeah. One thing we do have controller, we can listen to events like when we've switched tabs. So we could just pop something up maybe the first time you've switched to it. Yeah, we can hook into the event of when we first switch to the search tab and show a message. So you'll see that information. There's some code in our code base that probably does something similar, but you can also find some more information on the VS Code API when we do that. This is already done. There's nothing to do there. This is already done. There's nothing to do there. This is the last bit. And we started an MR about this, I think. Yeah, so we already have the way switching forward to the new one. Plan is what's taking all so long. Yeah, I have this. This is something I'm pushing forward. So
okay.
Yeah, those are our scope things. In addition to this, like there's a whole bunch of other lovability things we can add, like branding stuff. Like for me, I don't think this encompasses everything in scope. I think this is the must-haves. There's a lot of nice-to-haves. Some of these issues are already open of, so like in the boards here, I have one for a development board of like bugs and features and maintenance stuff, but it looks like we're kind of just focusing on the bugs and features right now. There's some like noisy console error stuff, which could be indicative of actual problems that would be nice to take care of. There's branding stuff, but I think also just while we're having to work on this critical path, identifying more areas we can improve lovability would be cool. So from my perspective, this seems like these are the must-haves, but I think there's a lot of really nice to haves that we can achieve as well. Yeah. I'm gonna hop off.
All right. I think I'm the host, so maybe I'll get this video.